Welcome back to the Mile 17 podcast, everybody. I have with me here Shyann, and I'm so excited that she's here with me today. Is near and dear to my heart. We grew up together, and I just have like loved watching her life as it's progressed. And she's gone through a bunch of challenges in her life that I think a lot of people can relate to. So when she kind of reached out to me and we were talking about her being on the podcast, I thought actually this would be like the perfect person to kind of come on and just like be a great example for like the type of person that I'm looking for when I'm doing this show. So Cheyenne, go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of tell everybody like where you're from, what growing up was like for you, and kind of
Yeah,
just talk about that.
cool. So my name's Shyann. I am from Sholo, Arizona. I grew up there my whole life, born and raised. I now live in Gilbert. Um, I grew up um, kind of a weird like situation. So um, my parents, my mom kind of left when I was young. When I was like around 5 is when she like completely disappeared, but she was kind of in and out of my life growing up. Um, up to that point. Um, Sorry, I say a lot,
No, you're fine.
but uh, my dad, he was also in and out of my life, but more present throughout like my teenage years and everything. But the big part was my grandparents. So my grandparents stepped up and raised me and my brothers basically our whole lives. And that would be my dad's parents.
Yeah, I always remember like growing up, like where your family lived. It was just like this big compound of just like your
Yeah.
family, and I still like I have like a memory. It was like I remember it was like behind that specific gas station. It was like called Woody's, right, or something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't even know who actually lived where, but I just remember like your whole family was always just like so welcoming. Like you were all just like even if you guys had stuff like going on, like personally, like it was just like everybody was welcome there. It was like such like a warm place to be. So how was that like having like your grandparents kind of stepping into that parental role at times and like having like maybe your dad coming and going? Like was that like confusing for you? Were you like at the time able to process that? Or is that something more as like an adult you look back on and you're like, oh, I mean that, wasn't quote unquote normal. Like how did you process that?
Yeah. So it was hard, especially for me, I think, out of all my siblings, because I was the only girl. And so I didn't have a mom. I mean, I had my grandma, which is literally a saint. She is a saint. Um, she saved us. But a girl growing up without her mom is just so difficult. Um, and it was super confusing. So I've always been really close with my dad. Um, but it was super confusing to like, hey, here's my grandparents who are my parents, but who aren't my parents. And then here's my dad. And they had totally different parenting styles. I mean, my dad was like crazy and free, and my grandparents were like very strict and very religious. And we did things a certain way, and he was like not like that. So that was controversial.
Yeah. Did you grow up going like to church every Sunday? Was it something that kind of like as like your like maybe like your dad stepped back in, you kind of could like step back? Like how did that like dynamic kind of work?
No, it was my grandparents were definitely like the boss. So I think that was always kind of hard for my dad because it was like, hey, these are my kids, but also I'm in and out. So I think he had to really accept like I have stepped away from these kids a lot, and my parents have stepped up and raised them. Therefore, I kind of have to let them be in charge. And even though that was super hard for him, I felt like he did a good job of being like, this kind of isn't my role. So as far as church goes, no, we were there every Sunday. Yeah, my grandparents were really like, yeah.
Yeah, nice. As you've gotten older and as you've kind of become a mom yourself, like do you have any like access to like your mom or like talking to her, or is that like something that you
Um,
kind of just like completely shut off? Like, are you comfortable talking about that?
oh yeah, for sure. So she has reached out to me a few times. It's something for me that I personally am not interested in. I do have a sibling that is more interested in it and is more open to the idea. And I know he's like been in a little bit of communication with her, but like for me, I think it's been harder for me as a mom because I understand less how you could walk away from your children
Yeah.
because like I love my girls so much that I would never be able to leave them, you know? So it's hard, but addiction is so hard, and I've never had to experience that, so I don't know what she went through.
Right.
Um, so I haven't really wanted to have that kind of relationship with her, but I will say that I can honestly say that I have forgiven her. I don't have like animosity or like bad feelings towards her at all. I just don't care to have a relationship. And I think that people often think if you forgive, that means you have to have a relationship with this person.
Right.
But I don't think that those things don't go hand in hand. It's okay to be like, "Hey, I forgive you, but I'm okay without you," you know?
Right, because I mean, when for me, like when you forgive somebody, it's like you're almost doing it for yourself so that you don't have to
Yeah.
carry that burden. You don't have to carry like those big feelings with you everywhere.
Yes.
And, as far as addiction goes, I have a lot of that in my family. And something that I've had to really understand is it's not when somebody deals with addiction issues, like it's not about you, like it was never about like for your
No.
mom, for example, it was never about the kids and like it was her own demons, and sometimes those things take over and it makes somebody like a completely different person.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's hard though to like not take it personally and be like, how could you have left me,
Right.
and we all process those things like so differently. But I think it's like so healthy for you that you've been able to kind of like just know within yourself that you can forgive her, but like maybe like love from a distance and like try to
Yeah.
understand her in that
I
way.
think what's always been hard for me with that situation is like my dad also struggled with addiction, but he stuck around. And so even
Right.
through his trials and his hard times, he still tried to be present for us, which was
Right.
huge, you know?
Right.
And so I
Right.
think I think sometimes people think the best thing I can do for my kids is to leave them, walk away, I've got these issues. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes even when you're weak, you still need to be present in people's lives.
Right, right.
So,
Especially when you have kids,
yeah,
and
for
now
sure.
being a mom, you can
Oh, yeah,
you can speak for that. So,
100%.
okay, so after when you graduate high school,
Yeah.
what does life look like for you? Like, what were you thinking college? Were you thinking like what like how did you kind of go about your life at that point?
Yeah, so I kind of, like, had no idea what I wanted to do. So I did cosmetology school, and I kinda wanted to do that, and then my plan was always to be in the medical field, um, which I started working at Summit before I moved to Gilbert, and I worked in the OB and did some, like, environmental service, so I did some, like, housekeeping there, and then I actually landed a job here in Gilbert, as a surgical tech. So I did that in eye surgery for 2 years there before, I started in dental. And then I worked in dental for about 10 years roughly, as a surgical tech there, um, pulling wisdom teeth, and I loved that so much. That, like, was my passion. But then as your priorities start to shift and I have kids, I finally was like, I wanna do something else so that I can be home with the girls. So I've kind of done a couple odd and end jobs staying home here, and then Dallin and I just bought a business, so it's
I saw
perfect
that.
because yeah, so I can be here with my girls because that's where I need to be.
Right. So I mean, I know somewhere in those years you ended up living you were in Japan for a while,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, so
yeah,
talk to me about that. How did you end up in Japan?
yeah. So I got married young. That was my first marriage. Um, and he was deployed in Japan. And so, yeah, I was living in Japan for a little bit, which was literally the time of my life. Like, marriage aside, I feel like I needed that experience just to get to Japan. Like, I
Yeah.
loved it so much. My heart misses it so much just because it was amazing. The people are amazing, the culture's amazing. I loved it.
It's like I've heard it's like a spiritual place too. Like you
It
just like
really is.
feel like I've never been. It's like somewhere like definitely that I like have to get to.
Yes.
But yeah, like what did you love so much about it? Like as far as like the culture goes, like was it like the food or just did you just like love like
Okay,
the
I love
entire
the food.
thing?
I love Asian food in
Yeah.
general, but also, like, the people are just so kind. Back then, I had the white blonde hair. They called me Elsa. Everybody thought I was Elsa from Frozen. They would take pictures with me, like, they loved me there. I just loved it. It was so clean and taken care of. The people were just so kind. I loved it. I want to go back and visit again just because I loved it so much.
So then, I mean, you said that was your first marriage there. So you ended up, did you end up getting divorced while you were there and moving back home?
Yeah.
How did,
So, well, I came home kind of knowing we were going to get divorced. So there was some issues in our marriage that had happened in Japan that I had found out about while I was there. Um, and I was like, I'm not going to be here and go through this. I was young. I was 20 years old. And I'm like, I just don't think that this is where I need to be. So I came home. I started the divorce process, which was pretty short. And then kind of just went back to being like the single life until I remarried again
all
for the
right. And
second time.
and how did that go? I mean, how was it transitioning from like a marriage that you had had previously to another one? Were there like big differences? Was this like something that maybe was like kind of like rekindled? Like, how did you end up getting into another marriage? Like, did you feel like it was kind of the same thing? Like you like just rushed into it, or like how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think for me with my second marriage, it was very comfortable for me.
Hmm.
Um, my second husband was my high school sweetheart. Um, and so, and he had also previously been married and divorced. So it was just kind of easy. We had this like common grounds that we had gone through similar things. And it was easy for us to just kind of build off what we thought we had in high school, which we realized we were totally different people.
Hmm.
Um, we were both great. And really, like, I've done a lot of growing since my divorce to my second husband, which,
Hmm.
like, here we go. I was divorced again.
Yeah.
Um, but I felt like we based our marriage off of what we were at 17,
Right. Right.
and we were not those people
And you
anymore.
had some, I mean, obviously some like major shifts in your life. I mean, from just being 17 to whatever age you were, 23, I don't remember, but like that's
Yes.
you grow. I mean, those are they may not seem like a lot of years, but like
Yeah,
you just become different people as you should. So
totally.
yeah, when you're trying to rekindle something or like kind of live like that same relationship that you had before, like I
Yeah.
just like of course, like, hindsight's 2020. Like, well, obviously it's not gonna, work most of the time.
Yeah.
Did you like, did you feel a lot of judgment or, like, that you had some kinda stigma placed on you because, like, you had been married and divorced, and then now this is your second time, or did you not really deal with that from people?
Oh yeah, I actually had a girl who like I went to high school with, but like I wasn't really friends with or anything. She had actually made a tweet about me, talking about me being like divorced twice. Like just it's so funny because people are so quick to judge,
So
but they
quick.
don't really know what you're going through. Like for me, in both of my marriages, there was cheating involved.
Right.
And not only cheating, but like a lot of verbal abuse. And so, although, yeah, I initiated both of those divorces, you don't know what people are going through.
Right.
And so, you can't be so quick to judge because for somebody to want me to stick out those marriages is silly. Like, why would you want somebody to go through that? And although, yes, divorce isn't a great thing and not something you want people to go through, it's also sometimes what you need to go through, you
Right,
know?
like, it's not worth, like, staying like, people stay in relationships and marriages just because they're married or because of, their church or whatever the
Yes.
reason may be, they have kids,
Yes.
and, like, there's so many reasons, and then, you end up just, like, living this life that's not true to you. You're not
Yes.
happy, they're not happy, you're holding while you're holding yourself back, you're also holding the other person back from living their truest and, like, happiest life,
Absolutely.
and, I feel like we as a society, like, we make divorce out to be this just, like, taboo, crazy thing, and it's like it's at the end of the day, like, it's still just a breakup. Like, yes, you're married and you're, like, legally bound to each other, but, like, it's just a breakup. Like, it's if you weren't, quote, unquote, "married," like, it wouldn't have been, like, this huge deal.
Right.
So how was that? I mean, because you had, your first baby with him. So
Yes.
how was that, like, navigating now, I'm sure from your first divorce, I don't wanna, like, put words into your mouth, but I'm sure that it was much simpler to kinda just, like, leave that. You hadn't really
Oh, yeah.
not much there together, but when you have a child involved, like, it's gotta be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, it's tricky. My first initial thought was like, "I'm not sharing my daughter." Like, I'm her mom, I've never been away from her, I'm not sharing. But when it really came down to it, it was like, what can we do for Hadley that is, like, going to make her succeed. And the best thing for Trey and I to do was to divorce.
Right.
We have been such better co-parents than we ever were a married couple for
Right.
her.
Right.
Um, and there doesn't have to be these like bad feelings towards each other. I know at first, like, and don't get me wrong, we had our bad
Of
times.
course. Of
It
course.
was super bad at the beginning. But when it comes down to it, like, he is happy in his life. I am happy in my life. And our common goal is to make the best life for Hadley. And that's what we're doing.
Right.
Like, and that's what we communicate. People don't understand, like, how do you guys sit together at a dance recital? How do you guys do birthdays together? How do you, and it's because our goal is Hadley and for
Right.
her to have the best life possible.
I think I really do think, Shane, that that's so important for people to hear because I think a lot of people go through these struggles and like even if I take myself back, like my parents were divorced and there was never common ground, like there was never like and I'm not this is not me to like bash my parents. Like I love
No,
them. Like
absolutely.
they did great with what they knew at the time. But like like they didn't do a good job at like just being able to like co-parent together and like keep like me and my sister as like the goal. Like it was always fighting.
Yes.
Even like to this day, like they still like they still hate each other. And it's
Yeah.
just like, for me, I'm like, why? Like
Why?
just have, and like that's their own, that's their thing. Like I don't
Totally.
know, I don't know everything that happened with them. Um but like I just again being like an adult now and kind of being able to like look back, like it's more hurtful for like a child just to like see your parents hate each other so much than to
Yeah.
just like be able to just like be civil, do things together, like, go to a birthday party together and like not, it have to be like this like super uncomfortable thing. But that also
Totally.
takes two. Like there can be one parent that's not willing to do that. And ultimately kind of like with what you're saying, like it ends up affecting the child the most, not like the parents that are involved. So I think that that's so beautiful that you and Trey are able to like co-parent together and like make that kind of environment for Hadley. I think in the long run, it's gonna benefit her like the most.
Yeah, it totally does, and it benefits me, like, to not have those bad feelings, like, I don't want that with people, and it's just way easier, like, it's just so much easier to, "Hey, Hadley has this going on." We text, we talk. I mean, his partner, like, we talk all the time
Yeah,
because once again, our goal is Hadley, like,
right,
and she has such a good life. She doesn't have to worry about going back and forth. She knows if she needs to call me, she can call me. And it's,
right.
I don't know. I do think it's something about our generation, though, that wants to
I
break
think so.
those
Yeah,
chains. And we're like, hey, we don't have to do it. Like you don't have to hate somebody just because you get a divorce. Like,
right,
let's make it different, you know?
right. Yeah. Oh my god, like I love that. I really do think that that's so healthy. How was it, like blending families? Like when you met your current husband, did he have kids or did he not
So
have? You just had Hadley.
yeah, so Dallin had never been married. He had never really had like a serious relationship. He was always super career driven. Um, One thing that was hard for me after my divorce with Trey was finding my worth. I felt super used. I was like, I'm this single mom. I have a 2-year-old little girl. I'm used. No one's going to want me. And if they do, they probably have kids or baggage or whatever. So when I met Dallin, I'm like, there's no way. Like, this guy, he's great. He's career focused. He's driven. He's, just everything that I needed in a person was Dallin. And he also loved Hadley, and they
Yeah,
just instantly had a connection. I actually had a couple people say, like, Cheyenne, he's not dad. Like, he can't be a dad. He's not ready to be a dad. Like, but I just always felt in my heart that he was ready. And our first date, he took Hadley and I to the aquarium.
oh,
And
that's
I
so cute.
knew after that, like, this is it for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet. And I mean, that's not easy. Like I can't even imagine like how like the feelings that you were having of and it like hurts my heart to know that you like felt that way, that you felt like, just like used, like who's gonna want me. But I think
Yeah.
like a lot of people go, like that's how like we look at ourselves, like when we go
Yeah.
through these things that, like damages our self-worth. And then, when you're trying to like pour yourself into somebody else and meet somebody else, like you don't feel worthy enough, you feel like crap. So how, I mean, how were you able to like come to terms with that and be like, I am worth like this type of love. Like I don't have to find somebody and settle just because like I've been married twice and I have a kid and I, like how did you get to that point?
Honestly, Dallin played a huge role in that. To be honest, like I kind of laid it out on the table for him. Like, this is my baggage, and it's kind of like take it or leave it. And he did a lot of reassuring. Like, even into our first year of marriage, it was a lot of like, that was your ex, this is me, I'm here to stay, um just a ton of reassuring, because I doubted, and I still have a hard time, just from so much trauma in marriage, that oftentimes I project that onto Dallin, and he has to remind me, like, hey, remember, this is me, like,
Yeah.
I'm here to stay.
So,
So,
what I'm hearing is like it makes a huge difference is like the partner that you have. Like if
oh yeah,
if he wasn't reassuring you and he was, because he could use that stuff as ammo against you and like twist it to like make you feel like
yeah,
less than. And so like what I'm hearing is like it really has to do with just like having a strong partner that is able to understand you and to understand like the things that you come with
yeah.
and nurture those things versus like make you feel less than because of them.
100%. Yeah, he made me feel like he just loved me for me. Like, I didn't need to be like, I felt like I needed to change myself for him, and he was like, "No. Like, I
Yeah.
love you for you. The baggage, the hard things, a single mom, like, I don't care about any of that. You're what I want."
Right, 'cause it makes you who you are. I mean, all those things that you went through and that
Yeah.
you've been through, like, that's why you are the Cheyenne that you are today, and
Yeah,
that's why you are the mother that you are today, is all those things that you've gone through is, that's why you are who you are. So,
right.
tell me kinda walk me through, like, what's a day in your life look like now? Like, you're a mom, now you have a few babies now, so kinda
Yeah.
walk me through, like, what's a day look like for you?
Oh my gosh, it's chaos. It's literally chaos.
Yeah.
So, we wake up in the morning, and it's immediately go, go, go. Hadley has to go to school. I got to get the other girls to the daycare, because although I work from home, I mean, it's hard to work from home and have two toddlers. So my two younger girls are 14 months apart. Um, so I have two like little girls that require a lot of attention.
Yeah.
So they go. Luckily, I have an amazing babysitter. She is a couple houses down from me, and she watches the girls. And then when Hadley gets off school, I go pick her up, and then I go get the other girls. So it's just nice to be flexible and be here, but like also have like kind of my time to myself, because you need it.
Right.
Um, Being a stay-at-home mom is hard.
Oh
Like,
my god.
it is
The
so
hardest.
hard. It is so hard. Like, people who think being a working don't get me wrong, I've done both. And being a working mom is hard. It is so hard too. They're both hard. Being a stay-at-home mom, props to you if you're a stay-at-home mom, because it is hard.
So that's what you're doing full time is mom. Like you're not like you don't have a job right now other than I mean, focus just being a mom. Not I shouldn't say just being a mom, but like
Well, so I'm running my husband's marketing and admin for his business that we just opened.
oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
That's super exciting.
Yeah, I was working at a shutter company running their admin, and then I quit that job so that I could go full force into our new business. So,
Man, how exciting. And
I
it's like
know.
it's so funny like as I'm listening to you talk, like I just like I don't know why I'm just like having flashbacks to this like just like crazy time we all were having in our lives like when you'd come visit in Flagstaff where I went to college. Um and,
We had
I
some good
we
times.
yeah, I was like, we don't have to really elaborate on all the things we were doing, but it was just such a riot, such a fun time. And it's just so like awesome just to like see like the life that you're living now. Like this feels like true and authentic to you.
Yeah.
And like it feels like you've kind of just like found your sweet spot in life. And obviously like there's ups and downs and there's always going to be trials and tribulations. But um like do you remember like those feelings you were having back then? Kind of like to backpedal. Like do you remember like what kind of like feelings were you having like when like you felt the need to like go through like this maybe like party girl phase or like how was that
Yeah.
for you?
Um, so that was shortly after my first divorce, and I had kind of just gone through this like really rocky stage, like just trying to figure out, who am I? Who is Cheyenne? I've been told that I'm this person all growing up, and I was convinced like this is me. Could I be someone else? Maybe let's like try and figure out if I could be someone else. Um, And I think I've found her. Like, I think it's taken a lot of trials. Like, I've gone through a lot of heartache. Um, but I think I've figured it out, you know?
Yeah, it's a never ending process.
It really is.
I feel like when I get to a point to where I'm like, I've achieved something else, or I've like healed some part of me. It's like then something else kind of comes up, and you're like, oh, now I got to face this. Like it's never ending.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's kind of like the beauty of just being human, and this life is like, like we're never done evolving. We're never done, trying to figure out like why we're here or what we're doing. um so I just think that it's great that you've gotten to this point where like you just feel so good about your life. um so I wanted you to kind of just like talk about, because I know that you lost your dad. Hasn't How long has it been now?
So it's gonna be 3 years that I lost my dad in July.
3 years. So kind of talk to us about that. Like how has like the grief process been for you? I know this, again, that's also something that's just like ongoing. It's never ending. I'm sure there's times where it's like super heightened and times that you're like, I'm okay. So how was that? Like, was it sudden? Like, were you expecting it? How has this gone for
Um,
you?
so this is probably like the hardest thing that I've ever dealt with in my life.
Sure.
So I've gone through a lot of things. My mom left, and I've gone through these divorces, and nothing has been comparable to losing my dad. So my dad had a brain aneurysm, so it was not expected. He had actually fallen and was in the hospital in Sholo, and they said that he had a brain bleed. Um, so they flew him here, and I went to the hospital. He was awake, talking. Um, my dad was a drug addict, so he was kind of coming off of, some of that, and he was kind of grouchy and saying things he didn't really mean. And so there was, you know, just a lot of that going on. But I still went to the hospital. I sat with him. He couldn't talk great, so I would have to like help him, clear his mouth, and I rubbed his feet for him and all these things. And um, but they said he was going to be okay. They said the brain looks okay. We did CT scans, all this stuff. They said he's going to be okay. So they were going to release him, and he was actually going to go to rehab. So that was the plan. Um, So my grandparents went to pick him up from the hospital. I was working, and when they got there to get him, he was unresponsive. He wasn't connected to any monitors. No one was monitoring him or anything. Um, but they couldn't wake him up. So they rushed him into surgery. They called me, hey, you need to get to the hospital. We're rushing him into emergency brain surgery. Luckily, he was at Barrows, which I'm so grateful for Barrows. They were amazing with him. Um, they rushed him into brain surgery, and basically the doctor just came out and told me, like, I don't know. Like, we did the best that we can, but it's a waiting game from here. So that was the day before he had passed away. And then his health declined so quickly. Um, it was very hard for my brothers and I because my dad didn't have a spouse. So here we are, the four of us, losing our parent. And now we're making these decisions of, do we let him stay here and be hooked up to these machines for
Hmm.
the rest of his life here, or do we make the decision to say he lived a good life and it's time to let him go? um and that was hard. That was the hardest decision that we've ever made, to say, what would dad want? Like,
Right.
what, it's not about us, as much as it is, because it's affecting us. It's like, this isn't our life. This is his life. And what would he want of us?
Right.
And anyone who knows my dad knows that, like, he would never want to be hooked up to machines for the rest
Hmm.
of his life.
Right.
And so we made the decision to um, end the life support, and he passed away. And that, it's been really hard. Um,
Did he have like did he have anything set in place for you guys as far as like this is how I want like end of life things, or had you guys never really talked about that, or like
oh,
because I feel like a lot of people don't prepare for those things because it's just like it's hard to talk about. Death is not easy to talk about, and
yeah,
like when you're like it's not like your dad wasn't like old, so it's
no,
like like those conversations aren't always had, and just me like working in the hospital, like I see this all the time, and it's like it's hard when you're like in the moment. There's so many emotions involved. Like you said, there's no spouse, so it's like on you and your brothers to all agree and come to like the best conclusion for your dad as to like
yeah,
what he would want. So did he have anything, or
no. So I was his medical power of attorney. So a lot of it fell on me making those decisions. My dad was also a donor, which was also kind of a controversial thing because a lot of my family members were like, no, like we don't want him to be a donor, which I'm like totally for being a donor. Like I think that's the
sure,
most amazing thing.
amazing,
And all my brothers agreed, like, no, we want him to be a donor. So I had to go, like, I just lost my dad. And the donor lady's like, hey, I have to have a meeting with you in the other room to now go through this donor process. Um, so now I'm like having to go through like all these questions and try
mhm,
and get my dad's like organs ready to be like donated. Long story short, he wasn't actually considered brain dead, and so they couldn't harvest his organs, which was
mm,
so lame because he really want like anyone who knows my dad knows he would like literally give the
loved
shirt
it,
off his back to anyone.
right,
So he would have given every organ he had that they would have taken
yeah,
to someone. So that
yeah,
was super lame and super sad. But no, he had nothing in place. I That's something that I definitely want to do for my kids because life is so crazy. Like you just don't know. We had
never
no
know,
idea we were going to lose him. He was
right.
54 years old.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that's not old. And like
No,
the best thing you can do, like something that you're saying that you've learned is to not have to leave that as like a decision for your kids to have to make if they're like in that moment, because it's so emotional. And like I said, like I've seen, never experienced this, but I've just like seen it firsthand, and it's like you're not always in your right mind. Like how can you be? Like you can't even think straight.
no,
And especially like I don't think that I knew that it was like something. I always thought it was like he went to the hospital, and I like you guys kind of knew he was going to die from there. I didn't realize he was supposed to discharge, and then that happened. So I mean, that's like such whiplash, and you're like, oh my god, like I can't believe that like that's something that you guys had to deal with, and like that emotional roller coaster is that's tough. So how I mean, how has the grief process been like for you personally? Like, is it a daily thing that it kind of changes, or is it just kind of like depending on maybe like the time of year? Like, how is that for you?
yeah, when people say grief is a roller coaster, it's like literally a roller coaster. So I was 19 weeks pregnant with Livy,
My
my
god, yeah,
second, when my dad passed away. Um, it was very difficult for me because then I had Livy and I had postpartum, and I could not, like, I wasn't even over losing my dad, and then I get this postpartum. So my depression was out of control. It's taken a lot of time and talking through it, therapy, and everything, to get through that. But I feel like I'm finally at a good healing place um, through my girls. I would say, like, I see so much of my dad in my daughters that it's made me be able to heal and still feel like he is here with me, you know?
yeah,
Um, Hadley is so like kind and genuine, which was my dad. Livy is so crazy and like just wild, which is so much
so
my
your
dad,
dad.
which is so crazy because I was pregnant with her um, when he passed. And
Yeah,
she has literally been a tiny version of him. So it's been so fun watching her grow because she reminds me so much of him.
yeah,
And then Millie's just like my little miracle girl. Like we did everything we could to prevent having a baby, and here she came, and it was like it made me feel like he knew I needed her, and she's just healed me so much.
yeah.
Um, Grief is a hard thing, and it can
Like hit you
destroy
out of
your
nowhere,
life
right?
if you let it.
Yeah.
It really can because it's hard.
Yeah, because if you I mean, you can probably see firsthand, like, why people turn to things like alcohol and drugs, and because, like, all you want is for that pain to be gone.
Oh
So,
my gosh,
like,
yes.
I feel like when you're in a grief process, like, you'll almost do anything to just, like, turn it off and to, like, not feel what you're feeling,
Yeah,
and I was watching actually American Idol yesterday, and like they were just, like, they always tie so much emotion into it.
yes.
And what they were like, they were just talking about somebody who had like lost their grandma, and like they, were just talking about how like they're never really gone. Like they're with you in the sunset, like in the sunrise, like
Yes.
in like just like the most beautiful things that you could, just in your everyday life. If you just open your eyes, like those people are always with you.
So true.
Um, and what you're saying, like you're seeing your dad like through life in your kids, and like that's healing, and that's the whole purpose of life. I feel like is to just like find those connections and to like feel like those emotions and go through these grief processes.
Yeah.
And so I I'm glad that been able to like process and go to therapy and to find, like, do you feel like you've like found peace in it?
I really have, like, I at the beginning, I would always tell Dallin and I had been married only for 6 months when my dad died, and so it was like, poor Dallin, he had to
Yeah.
go through all of this, but, um, I always told him at the beginning, like, I just want to look back on my dad's life and be happy. And for a long time, like, all I could look back on is him dying. And I
Hmm.
didn't want that. Like, all I could think about was him dying. I would wake up with these nightmares of like him in the hospital. And I finally feel like I'm at a point where I find the like happy times that I had with my dad, which was so many. Like, we had so many happy, funny, great times together, and I'm finally remembering those things and not thinking about the sad bad things that happened.
Yeah, yeah. Your dad was always such a riot. I I don't
Yes.
have like the literally like all the memories I have were just like great ones. Like he was, like you had said, like so sweet, so generous, so giving, like so welcoming, and like he didn't care who you were. Like if
No.
you were coming over to like hang out with his kids or be a part of your guys' life, like you were like welcome with like open arms.
Yeah.
And even like my parents always had like just like funny stories to tell.
Yes, such
Because
good stories.
because they like, they had kind of like grown up around the same time together.
Yeah.
So um yeah, man, like what a process to go through. And it's crazy, it's been 3 years.
It goes so fast. You
Yeah,
blink and it's so crazy. Life is so fast.
so fast.
I know.
It's wild. So tell me, like, now, what is, I'm sure I can guess this, but like what is like your drive and purpose in life now? Like what keeps you going? Like what wakes you up every day and gives you just like that drive to like keep pushing forward?
Yeah, it's definitely my family. I
Yeah.
mean, my girls, I all I want for my girls is to be able to give them a mom that I couldn't have. And although I'm not perfect and I struggle, man, I'm not a patient person, but I'm there, I'm present in their life, and I try to be the best mom possible to them. That's what keeps me going. Every
Yeah.
day is something new with them, just a coloring page that they give me or just a funny thing they say, like they keep me going
Yeah.
even
You
on
got
the worst days.
you got all girls, so
All girls, it is
you're in for some fun.
wild. Of course, I had all girls because that's my karma. My dad would always tell me, "One day you're gonna get a daughter, and
Yeah.
she's gonna be just like you, and it's gonna be your
Yeah.
karma." And I got my second daughter, and I'm like, "You're right, Dad.
Right.
Here she is. She's
Yep.
here."
She's got the typical middle child,
Oh my
syndrome
word,
going on.
yes. Yeah, she's something.
That's awesome. So, kind of like the last question I wanted to ask you, this is how I round out every podcast. And you may have already, kind of described this throughout, and that's okay. But just kind of tell me, the whole podcast is based on mile 17, which was just like a time during the Boston Marathon that I like had just seen my family, my friends, had just seen Kai, and I realized I still had like 9 miles to go. I wanted to quit. I wanted to stop, but something in me just like kept me going. And like when I finished, I just was like, wow, like, so much emotions were coming out of me. I couldn't believe that I actually just did it. And so I used that as like a metaphor just for life, whether that's a day, a decade, a year, your whole life, like whatever that's been, like what's a moment in your life that is like your mile 17 moment that you just like, once you got to the other side and like proved to yourself that you could dig deep and just like keep moving and one foot in front of the other, that when you got there, you look back and you were like, wow, like I'm proud of myself. Like I made it through that.
Yeah, I would probably say, I mean, there's been so many moments like that in my life, but I would say for me, um, has probably been having my most recent daughter. Um, because with Livy, it was such a bad time in my life, and I struggled that entire year. And I thought when I got pregnant with Millie, I thought, I'm done. Like, I don't want another baby. I'm not ready for this. I lost my dad. I had a baby. I've gone through depression. And then I had her and I saw her, and it was like everything else was okay. And I have just felt so much healing. Um, she's just this little angel baby that I'm just like, everything's okay now. And everything that I've gone through from the minute I was a little girl struggling all the way up to losing my dad was worth it, because now I have these beautiful girls that I wouldn't trade for anything. And I would do
Yeah.
it all over again if I knew that this is where I would end up being.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that answer. What is your when you talk about like having like postpartum depression, like can you like elaborate on that a little bit, on just like how that felt, and like how did you like what did you do to overcome those things? Like how does some like if you're talking to somebody to give like any sort of like just like insight or advice, like how like what do you tell somebody that's like going through maybe just like postpartum depression specifically, or just like depression in general?
Um, I think to be patient with yourself. It is not something, I mean, I have a medicine cabinet full of things that I thought were going to fix my problem. And I'm fine with people taking medicine. Like, if that works for you, I'm like, whatever works for
Right.
you.
Hmm.
But I think often we just need to like give ourselves time. Things don't get fixed overnight. Be kind to yourself as much as possible. Like, and I think also a big thing is like recognizing that, like, hey, I am going through something. Like, a lot of people like to push it under the rug and pretend like it's not happening. Let people know. Let your tribe take care of you. I had just so many people that were there for me during that process, and that helped so much. Like, it's hard to be vulnerable, and it's hard to ask for help. It's hard to let people know that like you're struggling, but there's a lot of healing that comes when you let people in, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I love that. It's basically like what I'm hearing is just like love and just patience
Yeah,
with yourself, and allowing yourself to feel these feelings, because like you were saying, like some people just like chemically and biologically just like need
yeah,
medication. Like there's just something going on that they just like need those things to
right.
stabilize. But like I think for a lot of us is like when you're going through these like depressive episodes, like it's something that's like causing it, and like sometimes your body just has to process it, and some like it just takes sometimes just takes like one thing to click to like change the
Yeah,
trajectory that you were going down, to where like you wake up one day and you're like, oh, okay, the world's a little bit more colorful today, like I'm not
yeah,
seeing all gray, like, and it just like slowly you'll just like kind of start to climb out of it until you feel like yourself again, and that kind of sounds like what you kind of went through.
yeah, that was definitely my process. It was just a day by day by day thing, um, to where like I can't even tell you an exact moment when it stopped. Like, it just eventually things just started to get better, and
Right.
there's still dips, but we all have those dips, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree. Well,
Yeah,
Cheyenne, thank you so much. I've loved this conversation. You were
yeah,
so gracious and generous to share your story. I know a lot of that is like so hard to talk about. Like I know that you were getting super choked up talking about your dad. And like that's what this is all about, is just to like connect with people and to show that like nobody's alone, and that we all go through these things, that like that's life, like we're all
yeah,
going to go through these, like whether it's losing a parent or just talking about like the things you went through as a kid to postpartum depression. Like just thank you for being so vulnerable and so willing to just share everything with us.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.